The ocean, vast and mysterious, is home to many secrets. Its depths are filled with creatures we can scarcely imagine, each more bizarre and awe-inspiring than the last. But sometimes the sea keeps its mysteries in ways that are not immediately apparent. And one of the most chilling mysteries of the deep was the sudden and inexplicable disappearance of Shark Alpha, the largest and most renowned shark in the ocean's history. Shark Alpha had been a symbol of power, a creature of myth in many ways. Known for his sheer size, strength, and dominance over the waters, Alpha was more than just another great white shark. He was the king of his domain, a creature that struck fear into the hearts of all who ventured too close to his territory. Researchers had tracked him for years, studying his movements, his behavior, and the eerie stillness of the deep where he ruled. But then, in a flash, he was gone. No one could explain it. Shark Alpha, the apex predator of the deep, had vanished without a trace. No body, no sign of struggle, just an empty space where once the mighty shark had swum. At first there was speculation. Perhaps he had simply moved on, exploring new waters. Or perhaps he had been a victim of some unknown deep-sea disaster. But those who had tracked Alpha for years knew something was wrong. They had seen him in these waters for far too long. He wouldn't just disappear like this. The world was left to wonder, where had Shark Alpha gone? Could he have been taken by a larger predator? Could there be creatures in the deep that were so powerful they could threaten even the great shark? The search for answers began, but with every passing day the mystery only deepened. Researchers scoured the ocean, analyzing patterns and using sonar technology, but they found nothing. Alpha had truly vanished, leaving behind nothing but a sea of unanswered questions. As the weeks turned into months, the mystery surrounding Shark Alpha's disappearance began to capture the imagination of people around the world. Was it the work of a mythical sea monster? Could there be ancient creatures lurking in the abyss? Creatures that had once roamed the seas and now waited for the perfect moment to strike? Speculation ran wild, and the media coverage became a storm of theories, some more plausible than others. But the truth, it seemed, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Then after what seemed like an eternity of uncertainty, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Researchers analyzing the movements of other sea creatures in the same area began to notice something disturbing. There was an anomaly, a strange pattern that didn't fit with the usual behavior of ocean life. And the more they dug, the more they began to realize that Shark Alpha's disappearance wasn't the result of an encounter with some mythical creature. No, the truth was far more terrifying. The mystery was not caused by some giant, monstrous predator from the depths of history. It was caused by something much closer to home. It wasn't a megalodon or a giant squid or a creature from the annals of ancient myths. The creature responsible for Shark Alpha's vanishing was, in fact, another great white shark. But not just any shark. This was a giant, a massive, 16-foot-long, cannibalistic shark that had been lurking in the same waters. The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Shark Alpha, the mighty ruler of the ocean, had been taken not by some colossal beast from the depths, but by a member of his own kind. The theory of shark-on-shark violence was not entirely new, but the idea that one of these apex predators could fall prey to another of its own species was both disturbing and revolutionary. Cannibalism in the ocean, particularly among great whites, had been suggested before. Still, no one had ever imagined it on the scale of Shark Alpha's tragic end. The concept of an apex predator, so skilled and feared, being outmatched by one of its own kind was enough to rewrite the rules of oceanic power dynamics. But what would drive one great white shark to kill and eat another? The answer lies in the nature of these predators. Great whites are opportunistic feeders, driven by an instinctive need to eat and survive. When food sources are scarce, these sharks will turn to whatever they can find. This includes smaller sharks, even those of their own kind. And when it comes to a creature as enormous as the giant shark that took down Alpha, the size difference becomes an even greater advantage. But there was another twist in this story. The shark responsible for taking down Shark Alpha wasn't just any predator. It had been the victim of gigantism, a condition where an animal grows far larger than normal due to excess growth hormones. This gigantism had made the shark almost twice the size of Alpha. Weighing in at over 2 tons, it was a living titan of the deep. And when it saw Shark Alpha, it saw not a rival or a competitor, but an opportunity. The story of Shark Alpha's vanishing is not just a tale of survival, but a grim reminder of how even the ocean's most powerful predators can fall prey to nature's savage law. It's a brutal truth, one that speaks to the unrelenting and unforgiving forces that rule the deep. There are no guarantees in the ocean. Even the most powerful can be taken in an instant, devoured by those they once ruled over. This is the deep, where the rules of nature are as savage as they are unyielding. Shark Alpha's disappearance was just the beginning, a horrifying prelude to the darkness that would unfold in the abyss. After Shark Alpha's mysterious disappearance, the scientific community was thrust into a frenzy of questions. Researchers, oceanographers, and marine biologists around the world were scrambling for answers, eager to understand the enigma of his vanishing. Theories were abound, and the quest to solve the puzzle pushed the limits of technology, sending teams of scientists into the depths of the ocean. But what they found was something far darker than anyone had anticipated. The first breakthrough came in the form of data, more specifically, data collected from sonar systems placed in the ocean for monitoring and research purposes. These systems, which had been quietly recording ocean life for years, had picked up something unusual, something that had never been seen before. The sonar data showed a sudden, unexplained shift in the behavior of marine life around the time of Shark Alpha's disappearance. For years, these waters had been relatively predictable. Schools of fish moved in cycles and the presence of sharks was constant. But after Alpha's vanishing, the data suggested something had disturbed the natural order. Sharks, specifically great whites, had begun acting erratically. They were avoiding certain areas that they had once frequented, and others were moving into new territories. There was a distinct pattern of displacement. This shift in behavior couldn't have been purely coincidental. It seemed to suggest that the deep sea, once thought to be stable and predictable, was now harboring a disturbance. One researcher, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, theorized that something, or someone, had caused this shift. The data suggested that the balance of power in the ocean had changed. But what exactly could have caused this disruption? Dr. Hayes and her team turned their focus to the data collected from the ocean floor. Using remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, equipped with cameras and other sensors, they began a thorough search of the seabed. What they found was both shocking and terrifying. Amidst the usual rock formations and coral reefs, they discovered strange marks on the seafloor, deep gouges, almost as if something had scraped the ocean floor in a violent and forceful manner. The marks were eerily similar to those left by the tracks of an enormous predator. The team was stunned. The marks were not from natural occurrences. These were the unmistakable signs of something immense, something capable of exerting force far beyond the norm for creatures of the ocean. The search for Shark Alpha, once a hunt for answers to his disappearance, had now turned into something far more sinister. The disappearance of one shark was no longer a fluke. It was the first sign of something much larger at play, something darker. As the search continued, the team began to analyze the data further. They realized that the abnormal sonar readings were not isolated incidents. These disturbances were becoming more frequent, suggesting the presence of something large and powerful moving through the ocean. One of the most chilling pieces of data came when the researchers began comparing the movement patterns of the sharks that had been acting erratically. There was a consistent pattern of a massive object moving beneath them, just out of sight. This new discovery led the team to a terrifying realization. Something was stalking the sharks. And what was even more disturbing was the possibility that this something was not just another predator. It was possibly hunting the great whites themselves. The massive object below the surface wasn't some innocent anomaly. It was an active predator, lurking in the deep. Dr. Hayes postulated that this creature might be a new breed of oceanic predator, something never before documented, possibly a species that had evolved in the deepest and most uncharted parts of the sea. This predator could explain the erratic shark movements and the unusual patterns detected on the sonar. It was clear now that the disappearance of Shark Alpha was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a deadly force at work in the depths. With each passing day, the data grew more concerning. The anomalies were not stopping. The team began to realize that whatever was causing these disruptions in the ocean, it was intelligent, strategic. It knew how to stalk its prey, how to stay hidden, and how to avoid detection. And worse still, it seemed to be targeting the ocean's most powerful creatures, creatures like Shark Alpha. Theories were mounting, but the truth was still just out of reach. The ocean was a vast and terrifying place, and the deeper they went into the mystery, the more it seemed to become alive with danger. The data they were collecting was just the beginning of something much darker. The deeper they dove into the mystery, the more they realized. The ocean was hiding something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined, and the disappearance of Shark Alpha was only the first sign of a much larger threat lurking beneath the surface. As the data continued to pour in, so did the theories. Theories that ranged from the plausible to the far-fetched. Some scientists believed that Shark Alpha had been attacked by another sea creature, something larger, something far more ancient than anything anyone had ever imagined. Others thought it could be a case of shark-on-shark predation, but no one could explain the eerie silence that had preceded the attack. Theories about ancient creatures began to circulate. Some whispered of a sea monster, a remnant from prehistoric times, still lurking in the deep. But that was just speculation. There was no concrete evidence to back up these ideas. The ocean had hidden too many secrets for too long, and now it seemed to be closing in on them. One theory that gained traction was that a rogue group of megalodons, if they still existed, had somehow managed to remain hidden in the deep, isolated from the rest of the ocean. Some even theorized that these massive predators were responsible for the disappearance of Shark Alpha, but no one could prove it. Then there were the more terrifying theories. Some argued that Shark Alpha had not been killed by any sea creature at all. Instead, they hypothesized that it was a human being, someone deliberately hunting sharks for reasons that were still unclear. As absurd as it sounded, the idea was gaining ground among some researchers. But no matter how hard they searched, no conclusive evidence emerged. It was as if the ocean itself was protecting the truth, bearing any clue that might explain the fate of Shark Alpha. With each failed theory, the mystery seemed to grow deeper, more insurmountable. As the theories continued to pile up, one thing became clear. The ocean held its secrets tightly, and it was willing to fight anyone who tried to uncover them. The deeper they dove, the more the truth seemed to slip through their fingers. Despite the mounting uncertainty, some researchers began to lean toward a more ominous explanation, that something much darker was at play. Perhaps it wasn't a matter of who or what had taken Shark Alpha, but rather the way the ocean itself was changing. With each passing day, more and more theories came to light, each one more unsettling than the last. But the ocean, it seemed, was not going to give up its secrets easily. If they wanted answers, they would have to dive deeper into the unknown than ever before. And as the data continued to flow in, one thing became clear. The ocean was hiding something far worse than anyone had imagined, and no one could be sure what that was, yet. The ocean, vast and merciless, had always been a place of mystery, but as the investigation into Shark Alpha's disappearance deepened, a new theory began to emerge, one that was darker, more chilling than any other. Some began to wonder if the ocean's hunger was more than just a natural force. What if there was a predator out there, one that was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, a predator that thrived on death itself? And what if that predator had a name, the Cannibal King? The name Cannibal King had surfaced after several reports of unusual shark attacks, where the victim was not consumed entirely, but instead left behind in a grotesque, disfigured state. Experts began to speculate that there might be a creature out there, preying on sharks themselves, but not to eat them. No, this predator was consuming something far more valuable, the very essence of its prey. The theory began to take root. What if there was a creature capable of feeding on the very life force of other animals? A being so ancient, so powerful, that it could survive on the destruction of others without leaving a trace behind. Researchers started to think of ancient legends, stories of creatures that fed on the souls of their victims. Could the cannibal king be one of these mythical beasts, a creature from the deepest, most hidden parts of the ocean? The more they examined the data, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. Reports of strange electromagnetic anomalies in the areas where Shark Alpha had disappeared pointed to something that couldn't be explained by natural causes. Could it be the presence of a creature with abilities beyond the known predators of the deep? Something that could warp the very fabric of the ocean, making it seem as if it were alive with malicious intent? A chilling thought crossed the minds of the researchers. What if the cannibal king wasn't just a predator? It was something far more insidious. What if it was hunting not for food but for power, feeding on other creatures, not just to survive but to grow stronger, to become the dominant force in the ocean's hidden world? A predator that had no equal, no rival, and no mercy. As the theory of the cannibal king spread, more strange occurrences were reported. More sharks were found mutilated, their bodies torn apart in similar ways. It became clear that something was hunting them with an intelligence that went beyond simple predation. This predator was evolving, adapting to its surroundings, and always staying one step ahead. But what was its ultimate goal? To understand the cannibal king, they would need to go further into the ocean than anyone had before. The dark, unexplored depths where creatures like it might dwell were just a whisper in the dark. And with each passing day, the mystery of Shark Alpha's disappearance became more urgent. Time was running out to uncover the truth and to prevent whatever was lurking below from rising to the surface. As they ventured deeper, the water grew colder and the pressure more intense. But it wasn't just the physical conditions that were oppressive. It was the sense that something was watching, waiting. Researchers couldn't shake the feeling that the cannibal king was aware of their presence, and it was ready to strike. And then, one fateful night, they found it, the cannibal king. Not just a predator, but a force of nature. Its sheer size was unimaginable. This was a creature born from the abyss itself, a monstrous king of the ocean's hidden kingdom. Its presence could only be described as overwhelming, a terrifying reminder of how little humanity truly understood about the world beneath the waves. As the team prepared to document the encounter, they realized something terrifying. The cannibal king was not just a predator, it was a king, reigning over a kingdom of lost creatures, forgotten beings, and predators that had long since vanished from human memory. The ocean was not just a home to this creature, it was its domain. The discovery was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. The ocean was not just a vast, empty place, it was a living, breathing world, filled with creatures that had adapted to survive in ways that humanity could never imagine. And the cannibal king was at the top of it all, the ruler of this ancient, forgotten world. The deeper the team went into the mystery of Shark Alpha's disappearance, the more they came to realize something horrifying. The ocean wasn't a place where life thrived in harmony. No, it was a battleground, a ruthless arena where only the strongest survived. Nature's law was unforgiving, and in this world there was no room for mercy. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. The sea had no compassion for the weak. In the depths of the ocean, creatures fought for survival in ways no human could truly comprehend. The predator-prey relationship wasn't a simple one. It was a constant, brutal struggle where the lines between hunter and hunted were often blurred. The ocean's law didn't care about morality or fairness. It was survival of the fittest, pure and simple. Shark Alpha had been a predator, yes, but even the strongest had their weaknesses. The question was whether the ocean had taken him or if something else had caused his fall. As the team dove deeper into the investigation, they began to understand that even the mighty could fall prey to the brutal laws of nature. The very things that had once made Shark Alpha a king of the seas could now be his undoing. Nature's law had a way of humbling even the most powerful creatures. The ocean was a kingdom where no one ruled forever. One by one, the great predators of the deep had fallen, victims of the very forces that had once helped them dominate. And now Shark Alpha was no exception. But what had taken him down? The team started to realize that this was no ordinary predator. It was a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. The Cannibal King, whatever it was a direct manifestation of the ocean's brutal law. It wasn't driven by hunger or the need to feed. It existed to dominate, to enforce nature's unyielding order. To the Cannibal King, every creature was expendable. Its only purpose was to ensure the survival of the fittest, no matter the cost. As the team continued their research, they came across even more disturbing reports. Sea creatures, once thought to be at the top of the food chain, were being wiped out in rapid succession. Sharks, squids, even large whales had vanished, leaving only the wreckage of their bodies behind. It became clear that whatever was behind this, it was methodical and merciless, just like the law of the ocean itself. The deeper they dug, the more they realized how vast the ocean's laws truly were. It wasn't just about the animals. It was the ecosystem, the entire food chain, all in balance, with everything tied together in an intricate web of life and death. And when something like the Cannibal King disrupted that balance, the consequences were far-reaching. What struck the team most was the absolute efficiency of nature's law. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about balance. The weaker creatures perished, yes, but their bodies fueled the life of others. The ocean was a system that consumed itself in order to create new life. The cycle was unending, and in its way, beautiful. But for Shark Alpha, and for those who would follow, it was nothing less than a death sentence. It was in this harsh, unforgiving world that Shark Alpha had disappeared. Lost to the brutal law of the ocean, the team could only speculate about the cause, but one thing was certain: the oceans had claimed him. The disappearance of Shark Alpha wasn't an anomaly, it was the natural order. A reminder that in the ocean, only the strongest could survive. And yet, the more they discovered, the more they understood. This was just the beginning. The disappearance of Shark Alpha was merely a warning, a sign of a much larger, far more dangerous force at play. Nature's brutal law wasn't just about survival, it was about ensuring that only the most ruthless, the most adapted, could exist. And the Cannibal King was the epitome of that law. The team knew that they had only scratched the surface of something far greater. They were up against a force of nature, and nothing could prepare them for the truth that lay beneath the waves. But one thing was clear: the ocean had its rules, and they were about to learn them the hard way. The team's investigation had led them deep into the ocean's mysteries, but now they were facing a new and unexpected twist. The disappearance of Shark Alpha had seemed isolated, yet everything was connected. Theories about the Cannibal King, the shifting ecosystems, and the ocean's brutal laws were all pointing them in a strange new direction, toward the river systems that fed into the ocean. The river was no ordinary one. It flowed through ancient, remote regions, and its waters were more mysterious than they appeared. As the team navigated deeper into these waters, they discovered strange occurrences: animals behaving abnormally, fish species that didn't belong, and plants whose very presence seemed unnatural. The team realized something. They weren't just studying the ocean anymore. They were exploring something far older, something that had been hidden beneath the river for centuries. The team encountered the first unsettling sign when they found traces of a creature unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was massive, far larger than any river predator, its markings distinct and bizarre. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was a predator that was perfectly adapted to this hidden ecosystem, an apex creature ruling beneath the river, unnoticed by the outside world. As the team examined the evidence, they started piecing together a horrifying truth. This creature, which had lived for centuries undetected, was part of a far more complex and dangerous ecosystem, an ecosystem that stretched from the rivers deep into the oceans. The Cannibal King, it seemed, had a much larger territory than anyone had imagined. It ruled not just the ocean, but the waterways that connected all life. Beneath the river, the team found something even more chilling. Ancient submerged ruins suggested that civilizations long lost had once thrived along these waters. The rivers were not only natural, but also tied to history. And in those ruins, the team discovered a cryptic message, one that spoke of a long-forgotten predator, an ancient force that had once ruled both land and water. The message was clear. What they were facing wasn't new. It had been here all along. This discovery led to an even darker revelation. The cannibal king wasn't just a creature, it was part of an ancient ecosystem that stretched far beyond the river and into the ocean's abyss. The rivers fed the ocean, but they also nurtured creatures that had adapted to their environment over millennia. The cannibal king, it seemed, was the product of this terrifying world, an apex predator born from a time when creatures ruled both the land and the seas. The team continued to follow the river's winding path, uncovering more evidence of this ancient creature's reign. The rivers were full of secrets, dark, long-buried knowledge that had been passed down in whispers through generations of fishermen and explorers. Yet despite their discoveries, the team could feel something larger was at play. The more they uncovered, the more they realized how small they were in comparison to the ancient forces of nature. The cannibal king was not just a creature. It was a living, breathing symbol of the world's untamed, unforgiving past. As they ventured further into the river's heart, the atmosphere grew thicker. The air was heavy with the weight of ancient history, and the water pulsed with a strange, ominous energy. The team couldn't help but feel they were on the verge of discovering something monumental, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the world beneath the waves. And then they found it, a cave hidden deep beneath the river, its entrance guarded by the roots of an ancient tree. Inside, the team discovered something that would forever change their understanding of the Cannibal King. The creature, it seemed, had been worshipped long ago, revered as a god by ancient civilizations. They had known of its power and had sacrificed in its name, hoping to appease it. This was no mere predator. It was an ancient force, revered and feared in equal measure. The team stood in awe, staring at the artifacts and carvings that spoke of a lost age. But with this discovery came a chilling realization. The world was far more connected than anyone had imagined. The Cannibal King wasn't just a force of nature. It was a reminder of a forgotten past, a past where humanity and nature had existed in a delicate, fragile balance. Now, as the team prepared to leave the cave, they understood that they had uncovered more than just a creature. They had unlocked a piece of the world's darkest secrets. As the team made their way back to the surface, their minds were racing with what they had uncovered. The Cannibal King was no longer just a terrifying creature of the deep. It was a symbol of something far larger, a force that had shaped the ocean and the rivers long before humanity arrived. The mystery of Shark Alpha's disappearance had led them to something far darker than they could have ever imagined. And as they sailed back, they knew one thing for certain. The ocean's secrets were far from revealed. What lay beneath the waves and the rivers, what had been hidden for centuries, was only the beginning of a far deeper mystery. The truth was still out there, waiting to be discovered.